back to Modular Nerds. My name is Mamir.
And I'm still Lennox.
And we're going to continue again with our anime topic here. So if you wanted to wrap up your thought from last time.
Yeah, so we're streaming these recordings one right after the other, and we had to cut our last one short due to some technical difficulties.
Yeah.
But my basic thing with that is Mushoku Tensei. It's great. I highly recommend it as one of it's like a baseline anime for like a lot of stuff these days. It's like if you had to come up with a short list of shows to recommend to people, Jobless Reincarnation is one of them. Because it's the character development is so on point that you get this character who, as you discover, like he's you see his flashbacks, you're like, oh, he had a really rough life and he was just this huge loser who never got it together, and he made mistakes, and he wishes he could have done better, and this new life for him is him figuring it out and doing better. They show it in some creepy ways sometimes because he is, again, still kind of a loser.
Yeah.
But he also, it's like you can see the growth, like the personal growth, and even some of the creepy stuff that he does, you're like, oh, it's not creepy because I understand where he's coming from with this. Like, I know what's going on. Like, he has this huge crush on this girl who helped pull him out of his shell and got him talking to people again and going outside the home. So he learned to not be a shut-in from this girl.
Yeah.
And so that's why he has this huge crush on her. And that's very understandable. Like, she basically turned his whole life around. And he picked up a fixation for her. I don't want to spoil the details. And I especially don't want to give certain stuff out of context, but it's actually kind of sweet, and it's very endearing. And there's other characters he meets that are very interesting, and they contribute to his worldview and his growth in their own ways. It's such a solid story, and like the character development is so good that it's one of the reasons I recommend it to people.
Yeah. It was something that I kept seeing on like Crunchyroll for a while, and I was like, it looks kind of cool. Like, I wonder what it is. And then I read the little like title that they give you, like the little brief explanation. And I was like, okay, like it sounds all right. I think I remember first seeing something on like Facebook or TikTok about it, where it was the very beginning, him learning like how to actually cast magic and everything, and I was like, this seems like an okay anime. Like, it's your average like reincarnation anime. So I was like, okay, like I'll give it a shot one day, and I added it to my list, and then forgot about it for a while, and then I seen season 2 come out, and I was like, all right, like let's start watching now, and immediately got sucked in. And that's a lot of these animes that I've seen. That's kind of how it goes. Like, I'll start it, and I think that's one of the good things about some of them only having like 12 episodes right at the beginning, is you can watch like all of it within one day if you want to. Like, if you sit down and take like your full day and just throw that on, like, you can watch the entire thing and be like done with it.
Or just, I don't imagine that for even people who have like busy work schedules, like even if like you throw up like 1 or 2 episodes a day, it's like you'll still finish it within a week. It's very good. Yeah. Like, you'll be very entertained by it.
One of the other ones that I have really enjoyed lately, and I actually just finished not too long ago, was Reborn as a Vending Machine. I Now Wander the Dungeon.
Oh, God. Okay, real quick, I just want to preface this for some people who may not be super big into anime, but also watching this. So, we've reached this weird point in anime culture where we've basically gone full circle, and now the meta humor has arrived. We've done so much with it, basically. There's so much, like, reincarnated, like, isekai stories. There's so many of these power fantasy stories that it's like, okay, we've done all the obvious ones, and we don't want to make another bland one. Let's do something interesting, and then the premise for it just sounds like somebody got high and then just yelled something in a room full of writers, and then that's how we got the show.
And you know what? Like, it works because
it's weird that it works.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like comedic. It's supposed to be like kind of laughing at itself in a way, because this guy gets. I think the start of it is like he's on his bike or something like that, and a vending machine falls off a truck and kills him, or like pushes him off a cliff or whatever, and he dies. He opens up his eyes and he's a vending machine sitting on a beach in like this fantasy world, and now he has to try and figure out how to be a vending machine, and he can't move. He can only respond in like preset dialogue options. Like the vending machine talks to you, so like if somebody were to insert coins or whatever, you know, it would be like thank you type of thing or whatever.
Yeah, let's preface that by saying this is a Japanese vending machine, so it's not like the crappy one at your workplace that has like the standard little spiral dispensers.
Yeah,
it's a Japanese vending machine, and even then, it's a fairly well tricked out one. Like this thing has all kinds of extra bells and whistles on it.
Yeah, like he can change with abilities like through points, and he gets points by like killing monsters and stuff, which you think would be very difficult as a vending machine, but he comes up with some creative ways to kind of like gain points. Well, actually, I think he gets some points from killing things, but he gets like all of his points from like money, people putting money in to buy something. I think I don't know if he actually, you know what, scratch that. I don't know if he actually gets points from killing things. I think it's only when he got like the like big boss coin or whatever, when he added that to his inventory, like it gave him a shit ton of points as well. But yeah, so whenever somebody buys something out of him, he gets points, and then he can use those points to stay quote unquote awake, so the vending machine is on. But he can also spend those points on getting more powers, like being able to transform into different types of vending machines. So he's been your average vending machine, he's been ones that sell like beauty products, he's been ones that sell gasoline, you know, he was one that was like an AED, like it wasn't a vending machine, but it was like an AED like station, I guess, or whatever, so they could like use that. But all these people don't know what he is. Like, they don't know what a vending machine is, quote unquote, you know, because it's a fantasy world. So like this is all new technology and everything, and
he's basically a mundane object to us, or well, you know, as mundane as a vending machine is, but to them he's like some sort of crazy arcane artifact that they don't understand what, and they're basically like, oh, who can fathom the existence of this creation, or the magic that went into its creation.
Yeah, and I mean, they're not entirely wrong, because he has like abilities, and they all have. Actually, I don't know if everybody has them. I know, like, the chick who carries him around, she has, like, a gift, like, from, like, the goddess or whatever. It's, like, some power that she has. It makes her incredibly strong. So she's able to kind of carry this vending machine on her back, like, pretty easily. And it actually helps her because she's super clumsy, and that's adding, like, a counterweight to her so she can fight better with him on her back type of thing. But like they all have like, and again I say they all, I don't really know, but people in this universe, they have like gifts from God. So like super strong, you know, can do like other special abilities or whatever, and so he has like a gift too, which is allowing him to be able to spend these points on things to be able to change and act like some other type of machine. And since he has his knowledge of real world stuff, like a lot of these animes do when you're reborn as something, he has knowledge of, like, they're fighting one creature where he has to, or he like spits out like Coke and Mentos. So they have to like throw like the Mentos in, but he can't explain to them what to do. So he's like trying to. He has like certain phrases where he's like, "Hello there," and he's like, "Too bad." So it's like he's trying to say like yes and no. So they're asking him like, "Is this helpful?" And he's like, "Hello there," you know. And they're like, "Okay, well, what do I do with this?" You know. And they're trying to figure it out, and he can't explain to them. So that's the kind of like humor that this show has. So.
And the fact that it's like just, you know, they stuck like a whole thing of Mentos in a bottle of Coke and then use that to defeat a monster was that's actually the clip from that show that I saw, because I was like, oh, it's a jokey anime, like it's meant to be like a comedy or whatever, but there's some interesting premise to it possibly, and that was the scene that I saw where he can't explain what to do, and they used the Coke and Mentos trick to defeat the monster.
Yeah, and I think they figure out pretty early on too that he's a soul trapped in this quote unquote magical object. So like he's not just a regular like magical object. He is a person. He has a personality. So they quickly learn how to kind of communicate with him. And he becomes kind of very sought after because, like, having a soul in a magical object, even in this world, like, is kind of crazy. It's something that can't be done, really. And they kind of explain that in another episode, too, without, like, spoiling what happens with that. But, so he's very sought after. Everybody, like, tries to steal him, or they don't like him because he's putting like shops out of business type of thing for like big chain restaurants and things like that. So
there's like all these aspects that go into it that you'd never consider just because it's such an absurd premise, and then you're watching the show and it's like, oh, that's creative though. That's actually interesting. Like I wouldn't think of doing this, or I wouldn't think of this. Probably because this premise is kind of absurd, but also because it's like, oh, this is creative. This is the kind of thing you would have to think of.
Yeah, and they call him Boxo. That's his name in the anime, is Boxo.
So there's creative, and then there's just, let's just call him Boxo.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the humor of it all, too. Like, that brings it back around to the humor, where it's like, something can be, like, happening that's kind of serious, and, like, they call him Boxo, and he's got like these great powers and everything, but he's a vending machine that spits out stuff, you know. And he can cost himself points to actually like dispense something without somebody paying money. So there's been times where he does stuff like that. Like one of the really cool things that I like that he can kind of do is he has like this force field around him to kind of protect him. Like he can spend points to create this force field, and nothing can come in or out unless he wants it to. So what he's done is there was a time where he made himself into like a helium balloon machine. So he was dispensing like a bunch of helium filled balloons inside his little force field box, and then he turned himself into a cardboard box vending machine. Like it made of cardboard, and so he became really light, and all the helium balloons lifted up his force field, so he could like quote unquote fly or fall without taking damage. So I mean,
it's so absurd, but I love it.
Yeah, he can do like these creative things, and he's just kind of like, okay, what can I do? Like, let me look through my menu, you know, to try and figure out like what abilities do I have, or what can I spend points on to like make this battle, you know, easier or survive it or whatever have you, you know. So he does like all these little crazy things that are like, that's kind of interesting, you know.
And that goes into like the creativity aspect of it that I was harping on a little bit before, where it's just like, it's an absurd premise and it looks so ridiculous, but then it's like, you know, first off, it's funny to watch, and then it's like, oh, watch them get creative with solutions to these problems that they're confronted with. Because the reason people call it absurd is just like, how would anything happen? And then the show's like, watch us make stuff happen. Like that, like this gets exciting.
Yeah.
A big anime thing that I really enjoy. Real quick, I just want to change tracks a little bit here. I really enjoy anime that Like it has those elements of the absurd, but there's like this deep and meaningful story going on in the background, and it's like you just have to pay attention to see it. Like what was the one I was just thinking of? One big one is Code Geass, where it's like, okay, the British still rule America. They're a world-class superpower, and they're invading Japan, and they're the bad guys. And it's like there's like this whole thing going on where it's like, oh look, giant robots. We also have giant robots in this show, and you know, people are inclined to like roll their eyes, being like, oh look, another anime with giant robots. Gundam fans. Hey, I will say
Gundams are kind of cool. Like, you know, I feel like I might end up one day buying and putting together like a Gundam, but I feel like I would also maybe do that with like a Transformers figure.
I refer to them as other when I call them the Gundam fans. Like, I'm not a fan of one or two series myself.
I don't know if I'd ever actually watched the show, yeah, but
there's a lot. Some of them are there's a lot, and everyone has their opinions on what the best ones are. The first ever Gundam show that I watched to completion was 00, which was fairly good. I know some people are going to crap on it because they're like, it's not as good as the other one. I'm just like, yeah, but this one's okay though. I like that it had a rounded story and a rounded message, and you know, there were meaningful character moments too. But yeah, so like the giant robot thing is a staple that, as you know, even people who don't know anything about anime, they're like, oh, isn't that thing with giant robots? Like they'll still understand what the idea of it is.
Yeah, real quick, did you see that Japan is actually like creating a quote unquote affordable like drivable robot?
Yes.
I think they got it down to, what is it, like $500,000 like controllable like Gundam pretty much. And it's got like the hands can move like pretty like it's not natural, but it looks more natural than like regular like robot, you know, like the fingers can actually kind of bend like actual fingers, and the arms move like nicely and everything.
There's better articulation, like a range of motion. Like, it's not just a big action figure. It's like no, this is a robot. You build a robot.
They got it down to, and I say affordable. Obviously, that's not affordable, but you know, like it's. I mean, some people are buying houses for fucking $1 million.
It exists in a price range which is feasible.
Yeah,
like not for like the average person to buy, but it exists in a price range where it's like, you know, you're not listing off an absurd number of zeros at the end of that number.
Yeah, so just wanted to throw that out there real quick while we were on the topic of them.
I get that absolutely. So you haven't seen Code Geass, I don't think.
No.
If I'm gonna make you watch any anime, it's gonna be Code Geass. Code Geass is fantastic.
I was just looking at my list to see, because I mean, I think I already have it on my list, but I don't see where it's at.
So, because I love it so much, and I've gotten that out of the way, I can express that there's also some criticisms of the show. Like, there's whole episodes that are basically fluff pieces, but I think those only add to like the character. Like, we see the characters just being silly on their own. It also like adds to the world around them being like, yeah, because a lot of these characters are still like, you know, they're young adults or they're kids, and you know, they're still trying to like, you know, live their lives, but like a lot, the core elements are still really good in my mind. Like, the fact is that like the main character who you're rooting for throughout most of it, like, it's hard to explain, but the main character who you're rooting for throughout the entire story, or who it's focusing on for most of the story, is someone who would normally just be the bad guy. Like, you're like, in any other story, this would be our villain, but you understand him to the point where you're like, oh no, he's definitely our hero. He's the guy we're sympathizing with, who we want to win. And then it flips around to his counterpart, who is someone who you're like, oh yeah, this is absolutely someone who is like a hero. But what he's doing and like what he supports, you're like, oh no, he's doing all the villain stuff. Like, he's helping the bad guys all the time. I can't root for this guy. It's like, he's like, what is he doing? Like, it's like this whole dynamic reversal. and there's all these different interactions and these different scenarios and these very dramatic moments. Johnny Bosch, I think his name is. He's the guy who voices like a lot of English dubs. He does the voice of the main character Lelouch, and he does a fantastic job conveying like this seething rage that he has when discussing certain topics or talking to certain characters, to the point where you're like, oh yeah, he said he hates this person and I believe it fully. Or he says he believes in this ideal and I believe in it fully, because he says it with such passion that I'm like, oh yeah, this is it. Like, this is the guy. He's talking all the good stuff up right now. Like, I can't disagree with him. And even when his worldview is a little bit warped by experiences or by context, it's like you're still like, he very much believes in what he's saying.
Yeah, I think I've heard a little bit about it. It definitely is like one of the ones that I have on my list. But yeah, I don't really remember like much about what I've heard. So it's definitely something that I'm gonna check out eventually for sure.
You absolutely need. I'm gonna constantly be pressuring you to watch Code Geass just because it's so good. It's just the 2 seasons. You don't even need to see the movie that comes after. The ending is perfect. The English ending is perfect. I will say that to people who might disagree with me, because and no spoilers for Mimir because he hasn't seen them, but it's there. The English ending is fantastic, and I love it. Japanese one is good. English ending is better. I said it, and I'm standing on that hill.
I will say, 2 of my absolute favorite anime, once I started kind of getting like really more serious into anime, because again, I watched a little bit kind of here and there, especially after like I started Rosario Vampire, and that was another one that I kind of watched like almost all the way through, and then I got my ex to start watching it, and she enjoyed it, or at least I think she did, because she told me, she's like, hey, let's watch that, you know. I was like, oh, sweet, okay. But 2 of the ones that I kind of really started getting like more serious into anime was Attack on Titan, which they just came out with the final episode. I'm waiting for it to have the English version, only because I really like the English voice actors in that. So it's nothing against the sub version at all. Like, I watched the sub version for most of it. And then I went back, and when I rewatched it, I watched all the like English version, and I was like, I much prefer the English version. And then Sword Art Online. And I know a lot of people in like our friend group and stuff, some of them really shit on Sword Art, but I really like Sword Art. I really enjoy the concept of Sword Art. Again, that's being somebody who, like, I love video games, I love fantasy. Like, if that were to happen, would be terrifying. But I really feel like that would also be a lot of fun, especially once things are kind of, without spoiling too much of anything, once things are kind of like resolved and it moves on to the other part of it, that also wouldn't be too bad either. Where it's like you know what I'm talking about without trying to spoil anything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so once it kind of shifts, it's like, oh, that wouldn't be too bad, you know, like that would be pretty cool too. But there's also the Sword Art Online alternative that I haven't started yet, the Gun Gale Online. I wanna watch that, but I haven't started any of that.
Did you mean the Asuna centric one, the one where it's like the
no.
You meant Gun Gale?
Yeah, it's literally called Sword Art Online Alternative, Gun Gale Online.
Sorry, I wasn't sure which spin-off. There's like 3 spin-offs. I wasn't sure which one you were referring to. Okay, yeah, no, I get you.
Yeah, because there's other storyline stuff with Sword Art. Like they go on like the whole uh, trip with like figuring out what's going on with Asuna, um, like before she started in the show. You know, kind of like the beginnings for her. But not that stuff. I'm talking about like Gun Gale Online.
I am familiar with that one too. That one's actually pretty good. It's got some cool action scenes in it.
Yeah, I haven't started any of that, so but I mean, I was like, hey, it's part of this. Might as well give that a shot too.
I will round out Sword Art Online by saying this: even if you don't like Sword Art Online and you just want to shit on Sword Art Online, you need to watch Sword Art Online just so you can make fun of the right stuff.
Yeah, and you
watch Sword Art Online.
You tried to get me to watch the whole abridged and everything, and I watched quite a few of it. It's got some funny stuff in it, but it's also that's one of the like big animes that I actually have like a pretty strong like emotional connection to. Like that's one of my absolute favorites. When I watch that, like feeling what the characters feel like in that moment in the scene and everything, I'm like, oh my god, like it's so good. Like I feel the love coming off of these characters.
And I will say this about that it probably has one of the best, more realistic romance stories in compared to pretty much any other anime that I've seen. Where I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, these teenagers trapped in a very serious situation have developed interest in each other. Like they're starting to actually fall in love with each other, and it's not just like a more badly written anime where it's like you have a male character, you have a female character. Of course they're in love. This is like, no, you have a male character and a female character, and they're going through some stuff, and they're having these conversations. It's reasonable that they would eventually develop an interest based on who they are and how they act.
Yeah, and based off of like the whole premise too, because it's dangerous. Their world is dangerous, and they have to get through this together. It's not just something where it's like, okay, they just happen to be in the same like world together or same area together, like or same situation that they're both like locked in. It's like this is literal life or death, and they struggle. It's almost like trauma bonding for them.
Yeah,
and it's like they're discovering things about themselves and each other in a very natural way. It doesn't seem forced.
Yeah, like I said, it seems so organic compared to what you see in a lot of other not as well written shows or shows that are focusing on something else, and they're like, oh yeah, and in the background these characters are developing a relationship. It's much more believable, and I'm much more invested in their love story just because I'm like, okay, this seems more real to me, and these characters are more fleshed out, and I care about what's going on with them. Speaking of shows though that have like a romance plot, I'm going to ask you a somewhat sensitive question to this one, but I want to hear your answer.
Okay.
What's a romance anime that you may have watched at some point? That you liked, a romance anime that you liked,
like an actual like romance one.
How about one where romance was just a strong theme? Because I know it's hard to categorize some of those, or you would never watch one of it was just like, oh, romance. Just something you might have fallen into, because that happened.
God, I don't know. I mean, like, I would probably have to say like Sword Art has got like the best romance attachment for me. I've seen a couple other that have like some romance in it or whatever, but it's not like super like romance heavy. But I know like Dress Up Darling is kind of interesting.
It is. My Dress Up Darling, yeah. Where for those of you who don't know, it's a story about a guy who's into like Japanese doll making, and then he meets this girl who is very much into cosplay, and then he helps her make her cosplay a costume for an event that she wants to go to.
Yeah. well, real quick, you say doll making. It sounds more like weird or childish, but it's like it's the traditional Japanese dolls that like it's become like an art form, and it's something like if we were to make like porcelain dolls here in the U.S., I should say.
It's
Um,
culture.
yes, so it's very like the hand painting, like the faces and the sewing the dresses and everything. Like it's very like uh respectful. I don't know the right way to say it, but it's like it's very much like
It's a respected practice. Like
yeah,
there's an appreciable level of skill and craftsmanship that has to go into the creation of each one of these dolls.
yeah,
Like if someone were to show you a porcelain doll and be like, I made this by hand, like I cast the features, I drew on the face and everything, like I made the clothes and all that, it's like you'd be like, oh wow, a lot of skill had to go into making this. So, and it's the same thing for this character. He's like an apprentice to his grandfather, and it's like there's like this whole family institution, and it's actually it's a very honored practice. Like like
yeah. That's what I was trying to say. It's a very honored practice.
he doesn't get made fun of for it. Like if he were to tell one of his classmates, "Oh, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but if he's like, I make these kinds of dolls, or I'm learning to make them from my grandfather," his classmates wouldn't be like, "Ha, he makes fun of dolls." They'd be like, "Oh, wow, that's really cool."
Well, I don't know if it still would be. I guess it would be for like the older generation. I don't know if like his classmates would be okay with it, but like definitely it's something that's like a more time honored tradition type of thing. Like it's like the older generation would definitely be like, wow, that's really cool. Like the younger generation, I think would still probably be like okay, well, big deal. You know, I don't think they would care as much. It's
Well,
definitely
he's
something
not.
that's more like historic.
Historic is a good way to phrase it. He's not being made fun of for it.
Yeah.
Is my impression. But we're glad we're focusing a lot on that. But yeah, basically, and then it's these two characters interacting with each other to like make the costume or whatever, and like analyze all the factors that go into it. And there's a nice believable romance that goes on in the background eventually as things develop, and it's very nice. I enjoy it very much.
Yeah.
But yeah, listen, just an anime that has like a strong romance element to it with something else going on too.
Yeah, do you have one?
I do, and this is one that I'm sure not a lot of people have even heard of. It's the anime Oh My Goddess. It's like Oh My God, but instead it's Oh My Goddess, or like the translation is sometimes Ah My Goddess. It's basically a story about a guy who, if I remember correctly, he's making like a late night phone call to like a pizza place or something, and then he accidentally dials like the goddess hotline or whatever, and it's like, hey, yeah, you're a good person, and so heaven has decided to award you with a wish, and I'm a divine being that has decided to grant it, and he has no idea what he's voting for, or sorry, not voting, what he's wishing for, and so he's just sort of like, I don't know what I would do with this, and the character who he's talking to, she's like just like this very kind being. You'd like it too because it has a lot of strong Norse or Nordic elements to it. Her and her sisters actually that you meet later in the show are actually named after the three Valkyrie sisters. Like the one like Beldandi, Skuld, and Erd.
Okay.
They're like they're the names for the three like Valkyries that are like named in Nordic.
Yeah. Sorry,
yeah.
I'm just reading some of the background of the show.
No, you're good. So that means you're getting a good impression of it right now, where it's like he makes the wish, but it's like an offhanded like, oh well, like because she's being nice to him, and he's so used to getting crapped on by like his roommates and like the other guys in college and like all these people in his life, and it's not like he's like super demoralized like a loser, but it's more or less he's like, yeah, I'm kind of put down, like I'm getting beaten down by all the stuff in my life, and she's just being this really nice person who's like, well, I believe in you, like you're clearly worthy of getting a wish granted by heaven, so you're clearly a good person, like you got that going for you, and that's really important, that's something really really meaningful. And then he just sort of makes this offhand comment like, well, if I was going to wish for anything, it'd probably be to have a goddess like you stay by my side forever. At which point she just sort of gives this wide-eyed look because that registers as his wish. And he's just like, and both of them are just like, oh no. I remember in the moment after like the wish happens, he's just like, what? And she's like, please excuse me, I need to use your phone. And then turns around, uses his phone to call heaven and be like, please tell me that didn't just go through. And it turns out it did. And then it's basically like the two of them being like stuck together. There's a lot of like supernatural like elements like involved with it or whatever. And a lot of it is like good fortune being brought their way because of like who she is as a goddess, and also him just being like a good person. So like there's like a karma system involved, and it's not like a dirty romance story where it's like eventually it leads up to like sex or anything like that. But it's a G-rated romance, like absolutely. Like it's like, oh, I bet you want to hold hands in public and look into my eyes as you say my first name, you dirty whore. Like I'm pretty sure this is the origin of that joke where it's just like the reservist nature or like the conservative nature of like a lot of like the older generation, where it's just like, oh, it's like, I bet you want to hold hands in public. What a filthy, improper activity that is. And it's not treated like that in the anime, but it's like their romance advances at a level where it's just like, this is G-rated. Like I wouldn't be ashamed to show this to my parents. It's so bland. Like it's so generic with like, it's just them just saying nice things to each other and being good to each other, and over like they're worried about there being a misunderstanding, but then they just quickly talk through it, or one of them apologizes. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I had a misunderstanding about what was going on. Please excuse me. It's a very sweet anime, and after I finished watching the anime, there was the manga to look at. The manga was one of those long-running ones that I think had an issue that it didn't know where to end. Like, it didn't know when to stop, and they just had to keep making more chapters. And I just sort of shrugged at one point, and I was like, yeah, you can tell they're running out of ideas, because there's, like, a panel with, like, a whole speech bubble that takes up half the frickin' screen or whatever with, like, one word inside of it. And it's just like, yeah, you're running out of ideas. Like, they don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah. Looking right now, I typed in on Crunchyroll, and apparently there's another show called My Buddha, and this one's labeled as mature. It says a 16-year-old Ikoyu Tanaka,
Japanese name.
Yeah. Has raging hormones that make every other boy's look simply weak in comparison. When he gets turned on, he's literally turned into a super powerful Buddhist monk capable of vanquishing the most evil spirits.
Okay, so that is not what I was getting at.
No, I know, but like I all I typed in was my goddess, and like there's one my goddess Flights of Fancy. And then right next to it is My Buddha. And I was like, oh, I wonder if this is something similar to like some type of spin-off or whatever. I click on it and read that, and I was like, oh, that's totally different.
I think the Flights of Fancy one, if I remember correctly, was the one, it was the movie they did, which has very good animation to it.
Well, it's one season, 24 episodes.
Really? Flights of Fancy one? Oh, God, now you're going to make me look it up. Let's
I don't know. I typed it in to see if I could, like, add it to my list or whatever. But
it's the second season.
Okay, so
that's season 2. Okay, yeah. Because there's 2 seasons of it, and then there's a movie. Sorry, just trying to focus on like what one thing to say next. It's a very good like generic romance one, and I remember it was the origin of probably my first ever like waifu crush, because if you stick around anime long enough, you understand that eventually like you'll watch these characters and you'll get like an attachment to them, and especially if you're watching a lot of these cartoons, or please excuse me for saying that, if you're watching a lot of these anime in like your formative years, you get like this impression where it's just like, oh wow, I'm catching feelings for an animated character. Hence the the idea of the waifu, which I think is a good stopping point for here, and we can jump into that with our next segment.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We will be back. Well, for us, it'll be short. For you, it'll probably be another week. But thank you for watching. Make sure to check out the merch, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. And let us know so far how you're liking the anime stuff. Let us know what your favorite animes are.
I get to embarrass myself for a whole week for the people who are following along as we're releasing this. They're just like, oh, Lennox is going to talk about waifus.
All right, and with that, goodbye.
Bye.